Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome to Clean Air Council's virtual Greenfest Philly presented by Toyota Hybrids. I'm Kamali Alloway and I'm excited to be here hosting Park in a Truck, in which we will learn from Kimberly Douglas from the Thomas Jefferson University Landscape Architecture Program about an accessible strategy for using vacant lands as public green space. Greenfest Philly is the largest environmental festival in the area, celebrating all things sustainable for the past 15 years. This year, the event is entirely virtual with programming scheduled through Sunday, September 27th. You can see our full schedule of events at cleanair.org/greenfest. Be sure to RSVP to the Facebook event to get notifications of events and things that are going on. We at Clean Air Council are a member-supported organization working to protect everyone's right to a healthy environment. We have over 8,000 members, which are key to our ongoing work to protect public health and ecosystems. Our members really bring the passion in the fight for better environmental health protections. So we need as many of you on board as possible to take action on the alerts we send out, give us feedback on our programs, and help spread the word of the council through social media. Finally, please consider making a donation. I'll post the link in the chat for anyone who wants to sign up to become a member. And without further ado, we will enjoy this presentation from Kimberly Douglas.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, okay. Thank you for that introduction. So hello all and welcome. Thank you for joining me in a discussion about our project we call Park in a Truck. But I often like to start these sessions with a question. Close your eyes, picture where you go to de-stress. Where would that be? Now, if you were my student, you would probably say your bed. Oh, come on, let's move. Okay. But most people say a park, the ocean, the mountains, somewhere green with water. But there are many, many people in cities that do not have access to green space. And with the pandemic, poor access has become very apparent and also heartbreaking. So I want to tell you the story of Park in a Truck, how it came to be. And then I'll walk you through the toolkit we've developed that guides communities through the Park in a Truck process. And then I can answer any questions you may have, as well as your thoughts about what we're doing, because we're always looking for partners. And as I said, I'm the director of the Landscape Architecture Program at Jefferson, which was formerly Philadelphia University. And my program is very community oriented. We work with neighborhoods that are often under-resourced, and that's where I met Vicki, who I show here. She's one of the most committed people I've ever met. She helps people when they run low on food, and in the summer, she runs an ad hoc summer camp for the local kids. She has worked tirelessly and with her own money to make her neighborhood better. In Vicki's neighborhood, there are no safe and cool places for kids to play or for seniors to walk. She lives in a neighborhood that's 20 degrees hotter than my neighborhood of Mount Airy and more dangerous than most, and where poverty levels have increased, not decreased. Her neighborhood has the distinction of having the highest obesity and asthma rates in the city. She also stands the chance of dying earlier than those living in Mount Airy, 20 years earlier in many cases. And on this map, the darker the purple, the more environmental degradation, which corresponds to low socioeconomic areas. Vicki's neighborhood is the one with the little red dot. She has 5 to 6 indicators of poverty and environmental issues. And as you can see, in relation to the previous slides, these areas of redlining correspond to areas of deep poverty and environmental hazards. Philadelphia also has the distinction of having the highest rate of deep poverty of the 10 largest cities in the United States. And while Philly boasts that 94% of the residents are within a 10-minute walking distance of a park, many of these parks look like this one. Nothing to do, no program. And I will also add that if you're elderly or a toddler, 10 minutes is really too long a trek. They're also finding that these stressful urban environments affect children more than any other factor. So I put this list up because it really sums up all living in poverty is really a life sentence that children really never escape. It impacts the rest of their life. And yet people think those that live in poverty or lazy, that somehow it's their fault. But people like Vicki understand that children in her neighborhood need better access to housing, education, and one that often comes up, access to parks and nature. Folks realize the need for these outdoor environments are critical, especially for their kids. I also believe access to healthy outdoor environments can alleviate some of these issues that these kids grow up in, which is why high quality green space is so important, especially in this era of pandemics. So back to Vicki, she decided her neighborhood needed a park. And in Philadelphia, that should be really easy because there are 40,000 open available lots that could be parks. Most of them are in under-resourced neighborhoods. So we decided to help make that happen with one of the lots in her neighborhood. We had lots of partners and community input, and we produced a park plan. But that plan was expensive. We couldn't get the city to sign off on a lease for the lot, and we knew if we built a park, we would need help maintaining it as the city was and is overburdened. That was 6 years ago, and we've yet to build the park. So we need a process that takes months instead of years, and that is inexpensive and is owned by the community, as we need many, many more parks than we have. So Park in a Truck came about due to the frustration I felt in trying to get more parks built. Either the city reneged on a lease for a lot where we did not have enough funding, or building trust is hard with communities that have been overstudied and overpromised. So Park in a Truck is my answer to mitigate these issues, a process that empowers them to change their neighborhood one lot at a time. Because just about every block in Philadelphia really has a Vicki. And our goal is to give him or her the resources necessary to lead an effort to design, build, and maintain a park for the good of their very own community. So as I said, there's lots of lots in Philadelphia. We also imagine that these lots can then be turned into a network so we can bring nature back into everyday life by linking them to create corridors of high quality outdoor space. Before I get to the actual design process, though, I just want to talk for a minute about our community outreach approach, because I think it's unique. We use an adaptation of what's called asset-based community-driven development. It was developed by Northwestern University, and its core foundational goal is to focus on assets and strengths of communities. As communities often internalize how they are viewed and what their issues or problems are, such as crime, the ABCD approach switches the focus to the assets and strengths as a positive motivator. And this approach can help mediate health outcomes and to understand the goals and vision of the community members, as it actually helps to internalize positive change. So part of our initial approach to this is what we call an empathy map. It's a listening strategy that allows community members to discuss their neighborhood. We start by asking about and listening to when their community was at its best. What do they care about? What's special about their neighborhood? This says to them, you are important, you have value. So we often dwell on the issues and problems of communities, which only serves to reinforce the negative stereotypes. And then they internalize those feelings and become that negative stereotype. But you need to know what the community has been through. So we also do something called a journey map, which provides a timeline of events that have occurred in the community as a way of understanding the impacts and acknowledge the injustice that has happened in these neighborhoods. This one happens to be for Eastwick, where we are working this semester on a number of parks and a pollinator corridor that will eventually stretch from the John Hines Wildlife Refuge to the zoo. And I'm sure you're all aware that Eastwick was again inundated with the latest hurricane, Isaias. And so we're also dealing with the trauma that the community is going through because they're not getting any money from FEMA or any flood help. It's really a travesty. So back to Park in a Truck. How did the first park come to be? Well, we wrote an article for the Inquirer outlining the Park in a Truck mission and received a huge outpouring of interest. The first was to contact us was West Philadelphia Real Estate, who they had a number of lots that, in conjunction with the low-cost housing they were building, was slated to be parks. We also received a grant from the Greenfield Foundation, and with input from the developer, we decided on a lot in Mantua at 38th and Mellon. We used the project in my landscape design studio, and we worked with the Mantua community for over a year. The first 3 months were me trying to get my foot in the door, as this was one of those communities that's been overstudied and overpromised, and so they didn't care if I had a grant to buy the materials and a lot from the local developer. They had heard all of this before. But they finally did agree. I just kept showing up. They finally agreed to work with us. And we held meetings over the spring semester and into the summer. We went to the board meetings, community meetings, barbecues, community celebration days, you name it, we did it. So as I said, we build on strengths and resources, and we started the process with listening to their vision of their neighborhood and develop guiding principles of what was important to them. This becomes the guidebook for what is ultimately done. The Mantua neighborhood's really interesting because they're a tight group with high social cohesion. They're very articulate in what they want. They also have lots of playgrounds and barbecue court and basketball courts, but not many places for people to sit and drink coffee and talk with their neighbor. And they really wanted more green parks with lots of trees. So that was one of the starting points for developing these guiding principles. One of the ones that was the most important to them was to build equity through participation, because if you look at who gets what in Philadelphia, it's very unequal. And in Mantua, they have been constantly lied to by Penn, not lied to, but misled by Penn and Drexel. Another guiding principle is to provide educational opportunities, such as in our Park Ambassador program, which is a paid position that trains youth to organize events and do light maintenance in the parks. It also teaches them leadership skills and civic pride. Also important was that the parks are networks for wildlife, and the 40,000 open available lots in Philadelphia are a huge opportunity to add habitat back into the city and to mitigate climate change and heat island effects, as many of these neighborhoods are often 10 degrees hotter than the surrounding suburbs. Once we had the vision, we started the design process for the park. So the actual process of the park in a truck is outlined in our toolkit. And the goal is for the park to be durable, sustainable, use materials that are local and that are easy to build, so that even my mother can handle that. The toolkit has all the instructions needed to build the park, from community outreach, building consensus, to fundraising, to design decisions. Eventually, we see this as a standalone document, an open source document, actually, that will be on our website for anyone to use so that they don't need us. The instructions are thorough enough, we hope, that they can do it on their own, and we're hoping that that will be available in another few months. Toolkits take a really long time. I had no idea. So I'll just walk you through the process. Step one is to select the components of the park. To aid in the design process, we designed 4 prototypes that are interchangeable, so the components of the park fit together like a puzzle. But how do communities decide what they want? Well, we have a series of questionnaires that help narrow down what they want, and then they select the park prototype they think works best for their park. So the first one is what we call an edible park. It's designed to be communal, where all the food grown is shared with either your neighbors or the birds, bees, butterflies, and bats that visit. The event park is great for community events. It has an open layout. You can set up tables, tents, and chairs. It allows communities to host flea markets, farmers markets, art shows. I think of all the park types, the sanctuary is the most versatile, as it provides areas to relax, but can also host more active events. So you could read a book, relax, stroll through the garden, or meet your neighbor for a chess game. The nature park is the last one. It's a place of seclusion and privacy, and it's great for lots of smaller gatherings and outdoor workshops. So there are the 4 types that we have so far. We're working on others, but this is what we have at this point. And we imagine that it's going to be lots of others as we move along and work with more communities on this. So each park has 3 elements. As I said, they're interchangeable. These 3 elements is a frame, which is the edge around the park, a central area, and an event space. So first you pick a frame in the prototype that you like best. And these are just a few options. We have many more. Next are interior choices. And then finally, there's miscellaneous pieces that can be added to the park. So you select the theme, you pick a frame, an interior, and then add-ons, and you get your preferred park concept. So they might pick a nature frame, an edible interior, and a sanctuary event space. The choices are really limitless. And one of the other things we would like is to be able to 3D prototype these park pieces so that we could send them out to communities so that they could design the park, much like we were doing here. You can see the components of the park. My students built all this, but if we could 3D prototype this, we could send various park pieces out to communities. They could play around with it and figure out what they want. I mean, it's very hard to design a park in plan, right? So this at least gives them some 3D understanding. So We had lots of design charrettes in Mantua. We had more. I don't know, we probably did 3 or 4. We also work with youth, and it's really important to get them involved. They also have really good ideas, actually. So once the community selects what they want, the essentials are loaded onto a truck and park in a truck. Eventually, we'd like to have warehouses around the city that could house materials and pre-made components such as benches, outdoor sheds, raised beds, so people could actually go and see them in full scale, sort of like IKEA, right? You can go and see what their offerings are, and then you can mix and match. One of the things we want to do also is get out into the community to scavenge for materials, and these are our 2 high school students that we worked with last summer. Because we want to reuse as much as possible that's either found on the lot or is in the area. We also use local vendors when possible. The plants that we used in the park in Mantua was through a local nursery that's in West Philly. And the ballast for the gabion baskets that we used for seeding came from various sites in the neighborhood. So here is the first park that we built at 38th and Mellon. This is in Mantua. The parts are then delivered. This is where the community is essential, as they must be there to accept the materials. And the beauty of this design process is that the community sees their vision take shape as they're responsible for what is ultimately done. So here we are. We built this park, except for scraping the site because it had all sorts of invasive trees on it. No machinery was used, just shovels and wheelbarrows. And then, much like a barn raising, the park is then built by the community with the instructions that we have developed from our toolkit. So here are more shots of that. And here is my main man, Jermaine. This kid was there every Saturday. He's 12. He's now a park ambassador in Mantua, actually, so he's being trained. I think he's going to be a landscape architect, but nobody believes me. So here's more images. Here's more. Here's another one of our youngsters. We had a lot of kids help. So here's the park before, and here it is. We built this in October and November of 2019, and here it is over the summer. You can see we were watering, that's the hose. So that's sort of an overview of the process. It's fast. This park was built in 6 Saturday mornings. It's inexpensive. We spent $30,000 on materials and delivery. There were no design fees. Sits on top of the ground, so there's no footers. It's permeable. Uses high wildlife value plants. It's senior friendly. Those benches that we built, they're all going to have arms so that people can get up out of the bench. And this particular park is going to have chess tables, and there's also a phase 2 coming that will be done hopefully over the summer. So we wanted to also ensure the park is used. And so, as I said earlier, we have a program to train park ambassadors. They manage the daily activities and they also help to maintain it. And then once the park is built, others see it, and the first park builders help the second, and so on and so on. So it's a pay it forward scenario where we're developing these green networks for both communities and wildlife alike. We're also working on different levels of interventions on the lots, depending on the ownership and funds. So there's lots of lots in Philadelphia that could have an initial use and could be used by the community until it's developed. So developers will buy these lots, but they just sit for years. So we could activate them with sunflowers or picnic tables, or maybe there's raised beds for vegetable gardens. Or there may not be funds for anything, and so you really are sort of throwing some zinnia seeds down just to make it a little better looking. So there's all sorts of different levels of activation that could be used, and we're going to develop this. It's on our to-do list. So we have 3 more in the works, one in King Sessing. This is a site at the corner of King Sessing Avenue and Cecil Streets. And this was done in conjunction with the John Hines Wildlife Refuge and Audubon, PA in Southwest Philadelphia. Because one of the goals that Hines has is to educate communities in Southwest Philadelphia on the benefits of nature. So we're partners with them on a number of initiatives, and one of them is this park. We were supposed to start this in April, and COVID has shut us down. This is another one. It's in Mount Moriah. This is a collaboration between Streets Department, City of Philadelphia Litter and Trash, John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, Audubon, and Parks and Rec. And the solution is to give the community a park, but also to combat short dumping, which is a huge problem in Philadelphia. So contractors, rather than taking the debris of their construction site to a dump, they dump it in open lots in the city. Now, this one they've put up barriers, but this is a street that they're going to decommission. So parking a truck is perfect because it sits on top of the ground. This one got shut down because the schools are not in session, and we want to work with the fourth graders to get design ideas. So as soon as maybe schools get a little back to normal, we'll pick up on this one. And then this one is in West Kensington. We actually started this park a week ago, and we'll continue for the next 5 Saturdays. This is we got a grant, and we're working with HUNE, which is a nonprofit in West Kensington. They work with students that have developmental issues. So we worked with 13 high school students to design the park, and we're now in the process of implementing it. And we're working tomorrow if anybody wants to help. And so one way we attempted to keep things going during COVID is to use this lot in West Kensington as a canvas and lay out different park ideas with flags and poles and buckets to show the community what the park layout might look like. We did get shut down because of COVID, so we had to stop. We didn't do as many design iterations as we wanted. But one of the other ways we are contacting or doing community outreach is through Google surveys, which has been somewhat successful. And so the other thing I'll just briefly touch on is the pollinator trail that starts at Hines and is going to wind its way through the city up to the zoo. And this will have a series of some of these open available lots as green fingers that get you to the main trail, but we're getting people safe through these green fingers to this main pollinator trail. And then just quickly, I'll just touch on some grant funding. This is some of the grant funding that we've gotten since we started 2 years ago. So that's what I got. This is my contact information if you would like to contact me or visit, see what we're doing. And I guess I will take questions now.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. That is an awesome program to hear about. And now I will open the floor. If you want to ask your question in the chat, you may do that. You can also raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask Kim a question.
I am a real person. Here I am. Question.
All right, we have a question from Chris in the chat. Do you consider air quality while sitting in parks, like by busy traffic intersections or in use of parks, like having no smoking in your parks?
Our take on these parks is that the community comes to us. So they have a lot that they would like to improve in some fashion. And then we work with them to help them, create this vision. Or they, hopefully at some point, they'll be able to download the toolkit and do this themselves. So the siting of the park is really dependent on where the community wants to work. And I will say that, just planting the park will also help with air quality, right? So as many trees as you could get on a lot will really help with the air quality. We're working in Eastwick, which has the airport, 95, and flooding. And so one of the strategies is to really try to green that area up even more than it has tree-wise, in order to trap particles, which is a really effective means of helping air pollution. Do we ban smoking? I would love to, but no, we don't. That is up to the community to police. So we we don't get involved in the rules. They're really up to the community and how they want to police those issues.
Question from Bobby. How hard is it to turn a random unused lot into a park? Have you ever found that someone owned it and didn't want it turned into a park?
No. in a word, no. It was interesting when we were building Mantua, we had all sorts of people walk by and say, how do I get one of those? My mother's got 2 lots. I'd love to have a park. So I'm sure we'll come across someone that doesn't want a park because they're afraid it's going to be mismanaged. And we're working in West Kensington on the Hune lot, and there's a gentleman that his house is next to the park. And he said, well, how are you going to police it? I don't want, kids here at night, smoking and drinking and et cetera. And again, I think that's got to come from the community. It's their park, and they're going to have to decide how to manage some of these issues. It's a sticky question. It really is. But we're hoping that it's called collective efficacy. It's where the community comes together and they decide how they want to live in their community. And part of what we're trying to do is empower that.
All right, well, if that is all of your questions, the recording of this webinar, along with all of our webinars, will be available at cleanair.org/Greenfest. If you want to go back and look at anything, get Kim's contact information. We've been very excited to learn about this endeavor. We are huge fans of green space at Clean Air Council for all the reasons that you mentioned. And again, I hope to see everybody at more of our programming, cleanair.org/Greenfest for the schedule. Thanks again, Kim.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.